It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us to talk about her book, The Grace of Enough, Pursuing Less and Living More in a Throwaway Culture is Haley Stewart. Thanks for being here, Haley.
Sure. Thanks so much.
I'm so interested in this. I'm kind of curious, though, with the topic of your book and everything, how do you feel about the tiny house movement?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I like that it's a response to our consumerism and materialism. On the other hand, though, I can see it almost becoming its own obsession with possessions. Just you're obsessed with having a small amount of possessions, but it's still like kind of what your world is revolving around,
right.
If that makes sense. So I think it can be a step in the right direction, but could also kind of swing in this other way that's also just a little bit twisted from how things should be ordered.
Yeah. The houses always look really nice once they're built and moved in, but I always wonder what they look like a year later. Like, is there just clutter everywhere, or are they actually keeping them organized?
Especially because it seems like not many people do that with lots of children in the house.
Yeah, right.
So it seems like more like, I don't know, it's 30-something young professionals who have a lot of time to spend on picking out which, 30 items they're going to have in their home. But it is fascinating. I'm pretty fascinated by it. My husband and I were just talking about, what if we, transformed a bus into a house and could just travel around? That would be cool, but, would it be totally nuts? Right. So I'm kind of intrigued by it, but I can see it kind of going both ways.
Well, and I love hearing your story about how you've simplified and kind of going off the grid a little bit too. But I'm kind of curious, what's something that you would still consider that you have too much of?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I have too many books, but I'm not sure if that's really a vice.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to pretend it's not.
Right.
Probably clothes for me, honestly. Okay. I have a hard time saying no to not having too many clothes in my wardrobe. And I think that's, I definitely have more than I need, but it's a pretty countercultural move to say, well, here's, I have 7 outfits, one for every day of the week. I think that would be pretty awesome to get to that point, but I'm definitely not there yet.
Yeah. So what started the whole movement to simplify for you?
Sure. Well, my husband and I were living in Florida. We had 3 little kids at the time. Now we have 4. And we're kind of feeling stuck in the 9-to-5 grind, where we were, barely covering our bills, but still felt like we didn't get to spend a lot of time as a family. We're always working and stressed out. And so we just thought, okay, we need to make a change. And we kind of tried working more hours and discovered that was actually more expensive, because then we needed to order takeout more, all these things that you can only do if you have time. And so we realized we wanted to do something pretty radically different. And so my husband got an internship at a sustainable agriculture training farm in Texas without flushing toilets. We had a little 650 square foot apartment. So it was kind of like living in a tiny house.
There you go.
And moved out there for a year-long internship to kind of reset and regroup and figure out really what we wanted our family life to look like and our work life look like, and try to reorder it in a way that matched up with the gospel.
What do you think we start compiling so much stuff in the first place?
I think a lot of it has to do with, it's really easy, and I still find myself doing this, like buying into this lie of this is going to be what makes us happy. This is going to be what satisfies us.
Just this one more thing.
This one more thing that I'm going to be a different kind of person, or I'm going to be happy or satisfied or fulfilled in some way. And so I think it does come from our culture's spiritual poverty, that we're trying to fill up our souls with something that can't ever satisfy us, but we just keep trying. And I still find myself doing this. and then looking back and being like, Haley, why did you think this bag that you're going to buy was going to change your life? Obviously, it wasn't going to change your life. You're no different than you were yesterday.
Yeah.
And so, but I think we just feel like it's hard to get out of that mindset.
Yeah. We're talking with Haley Stewart. The book is The Grace of Enough, Pursuing Less and Living More in a Throwaway Culture. And how would you describe a throwaway culture?
Sure. The throwaway culture is our culture of waste and overconsumption and then, throwing things out. But it goes beyond just our possessions and how we deal with the resources of God's creation, and even leaks into how we treat and view other human beings. And so instead of, seeing another human being as made in the image of God and, a child of God, we see another human being as also something to be used up and discarded at our convenience and for our consumption. And so I think that can touch everything from really, grave matters like euthanasia or abortion, where we're literally discarding a human being, to how we don't feel like we have time to have people over for dinner. We don't have time to waste with our children because we have just all of these views of other human beings that don't fully take into account and appreciate that they're souls made in the image of God that should be loved and not used. I think it's just so easy for us to use up people the way we use up our stuff.
So what would you propose for an antidote?
Yeah, well, I think that first we have to realize how much the throwaway culture has seeped into the lens with which we view the world around us, and then start noticing when we're seeing other people or seeing God's creation through that lens and trying to reorient it to having the mind of Christ as we look at things. And I think that because our culture has swung so far in the direction of this throwaway mindset, that it's really, really simple habits and practices that can start drawing us back into seeing things through the lens of the gospel. Things like having our neighbors over for dinner, or, sitting down, cooking a meal with our family and sitting down and talking to them as we're eating instead of, rushing off to whatever activity we have in the evening. That those really simple things are not anything revolutionary or radical. People definitely don't need to move to a farm with no flushing toilets for a year. Those things can help us reorient our mindset and the lens that we're looking at the world through.
Okay, so if we're not going to go to the compost toilet farm, what is a lesson that you learned from that experience that you can share with us, because we're not going to be able to duplicate that in our lives?
Yeah, I think that one thing that really made an impression on me was seeing how my kids responded to just being out in nature more, because, we had such a tiny living space. We were always outside. And just the wonder and joy with which they viewed the world that started to rub off on us, on my husband and I, and realizing that when we look at God's creation and see it as this beautiful gift and this beautiful mystery that He's created out of love for us, that really can help shift us to a more worshipful attitude and to be more careful with the resources that He's given us. And so all don't need to move to a farm, but we can be more aware of our connection to our food and our farmers. We can be just more aware of noticing and attending to the beauty that God has created and offering up gratitude and thanks to Him with a prayerful heart. And so I think that that's something we can all do, even if it's just, I'm going to start taking a walk in the evening and noticing God's world outside, or I'm going to go to a park, or I'm going to start a garden in my backyard, or even just a pot of herbs on my windowsill. That those are some things we can do to just start noticing with wonder the beauty that God has created around us.
How old were your kids whenever you first started pursuing this?
Let's see. Our oldest was almost 6, And then we had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old that we got to potty train on the compost toilet, which added an extra level of excitement. Yeah. So they were pretty little at the time.
Well, how does any of this or all of this impact our faith?
Yeah, well, I think that our habits and practices and the material world around us, if we note that those things are infused with God's grace, and I think that I come from a Protestant background, and so becoming Catholic, I became more aware of how it's not like there's this spirituality that has no connection to our physical bodies and the material world around us, but that these things intersect. And so when we do something like stop and cook together and sit down and have a friend over for dinner and engage in hospitality for that person, that we are taking on a spiritual task, even if it doesn't take place at church. Everything we do has some connection to our spiritual life and can help reorient us towards Christ.
Looking through the list of things that you talk about in the book, some of them seem very unrelated, and some of them almost might, at least initially, seem contradictory. So I'm kind of curious. You have things like live simply, offer hospitality, nurture community, and then one of them is like prioritize beauty. Can you explain how that one fits in?
Yeah, I think in our throwaway culture, we see everything almost through this like super capitalistic mindset where we're thinking about our time and efficiency and production. And so stopping to notice beauty, the beauty of the music, of sacred music, the beauty of church architecture, that these things no longer sound important to us because we're thinking about efficiency and productivity. And so stopping to attend to beauty and surrounding ourselves with beauty is one way of reorienting ourselves so that we're trying to see things that aren't efficient, things that might not be productive, but that point us towards God.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Putting up, beautiful art in your home and making that space a place of, like, one of my favorite images is one of Botticelli's Madonna and Child paintings. And every time I walk by it, it does remind me of the love of God and makes me want to draw close to Our Lady and just makes me pause because it is so beautiful. And so I think that when we surround ourselves with beauty, it helps us stop rushing through the next thing we need to do and take that breath of silence where I think God can speak to us.
Well, and that's what I like about this. I mean, whenever you talk about live simply and then you're talking about hanging up artwork, it's not just live simply for the sake of living simply, but being intentional about the things that we do put into our life. And is this actually drawing me closer to God or just a distraction and some kind of giving into consumerism? So this is great. I love the book. Where can people get a copy of it and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. You can get a copy from Amazon or you can order from Ave Maria Press, which is the publisher. So yeah, you can pre-order now and it's released on September 7th.
And your website and blog?
It's carrotsformichaelmas.com. So it's carrots for Michael, MAS.com is where you can find me.
I love it. Check it out. Check out the book. Again, it's called The Grace of Enough, Pursuing Less and Living More in a Throwaway Culture. Thank you so much, Haley Stewart, for joining us today and sharing this with us.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.